the silent arrival. They came to Jerusalem with no army, no treasure, and no grand titles. Yet within a few years, the Knights Templar had gained access to the most sacred ground in the city, directly above the ruins of Solomon's Temple. While other crusaders prayed in churches or fought in the streets, 9 knights asked for something extraordinary: permission to live on the Temple Mount itself, beneath the dome of the rock. Their stated purpose was to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to holy sites, but their real work began below the surface. At night, the ground trembled softly as stones shifted and ropes lowered tools into long-sealed cavities. Their first mission was not battle, it was excavation, and not long after, rumors began to spread, whispers of a door underground, not made of wood or iron, but of polished stone, carved with a strange seal and locked with no key. Why would a group of knights sworn to poverty dig for years beneath a shrine unless they believed something was hidden there? 9 years of silence. For nearly a decade, 9 knights lived atop the most sacred ground in Jerusalem, and no one knew exactly why. They claimed to be poor, yet they moved with purpose. They offered no sermons, built no churches, and recruited no new members. While the rest of the Crusader world waged wars and carved borders, these 9 remained still, focused only on what lay beneath their feet. People watched them descend into the ruins with tools, parchments, and strange devices. At night, the air near their quarters filled with the dull thud of metal striking stone and muffled voices speaking in tongues unfamiliar even to local priests. What could have kept them below ground for nearly a decade in total silence? Official records offer little. The early Latin kingdom mentions the knights only in passing, as if their presence was unimportant. But that absence speaks volumes. How could a military order thrive for so long with no visible output, no known victories, and no documented actions? The silence is strange, and strange silences in history often mean something was buried, literally or otherwise. Legends passed down in nearby villages tell of one knight who emerged from the tunnels pale and unblinking, refusing to speak for days. Another was seen washing a scroll case in a spring outside the city, then vanishing by dawn. These may be stories, but their details have endured for centuries, and in the study of secrets, the stories that refuse to die are often worth listening to. The sealed chamber. Long before modern tools and politics sealed it off from excavation, the Temple Mount was rumored to sit atop a buried structure far more complex than any surface temple. Ancient texts across 3 religions hinted at strange geometry beneath the stone platform. Vaults, tunnels, and chambers laid out in a forgotten order. The Templars didn't dig blindly. Their tools went down with purpose, as if following an invisible design only a few knew how to read. Jewish texts like the Mishnah speak of substructures used by temple priests to move unseen, rooms for rituals sealed by massive stone slabs, corridors aligned to sacred measurements. In Islam, early descriptions included references to stone pathways buried below, known to the prophets but hidden from the masses. One source described a descending staircase that curved like a spiral, said to lead to a gate that had not been opened since the time of Solomon. Local accounts from the time describe the knights lowering objects into narrow shafts and measuring carved stones by candlelight. Some theorists claim they uncovered blueprints etched into the foundation stones, maps not of geography, but of sacred geometry, patterns that aligned with constellations, star paths, and ancient rites. Could the Temple of Solomon have been more than a holy site? Was it a coded machine built to reflect divine structure? At the end of a collapsed staircase, they reportedly found what appeared to be a sealed chamber, its entrance marked by a 7-pointed star and a pattern of lines no one could fully explain. Some believe they opened it in secret and removed objects that were never seen again. The Forbidden Scrolls. The greatest threat to any kingdom isn't a sword, it's a scroll. Some say the chamber held dozens of scrolls wrapped in brittle leather, arranged with the care of a sacred archive. These weren't scriptures known to the church or copies of familiar laws. They were older, possibly written before the Bible was even conceived. Ancient texts from Jewish, Islamic, and Eastern Christian traditions make quiet mention of scrolls stored in deep places. The Talmud refers to writings sealed beneath the temple in stone niches. Some scholars suggested that among these writings were records of a forgotten priesthood, keepers of language, measurement, and spiritual laws, long erased from public memory. One legend claims Solomon feared the misuse of this knowledge and ordered his scribes to write in codes and bury their work beneath the foundations. Arabic chroniclers during later rule tell of Frankish knights hauling away strange cylindrical containers under nightfall. One even described books that burned no fire yet lit the eye. Could they be echoing the same moment? The silent removal of forbidden words from the heart of Jerusalem. A few researchers think the scrolls described not just religious laws but scientific principles disguised as prophecy, proportions tied to resonance, sound harmonics linked to structure, descriptions of materials and forms that, when aligned properly, could amplify energy in ways no one at the time could explain. Would that not be seen as sorcery by the medieval church? Could that explain the silence? The bloodline theory. Among the most explosive theories is the belief that the Templars discovered records not of treasure or lost rituals, but of blood. Hidden scrolls containing genealogies that traced a direct line through King David, past Solomon, and into a name too dangerous to speak in medieval Europe, Jesus. Not as divine myth, but as part of a real, preserved bloodline. If true, this would shatter the Church's narrative and challenge every throne that claimed divine right. Could this have been the true secret the Templars died to protect? Certain medieval texts hint at a legacy sealed in veins found in a hidden room beneath Solomon's temple. The Templars, after all, returned from Jerusalem with more than stories. Their inner rituals referenced the vine of the House of David and a root unseen by kings. These were not just poetic phrases. Researchers now believe they were veiled references to a bloodline traced and revered by an inner circle within the order. In France, the Templars made close ties with noble families descended from the Merovingian line, itself rumored in some circles to trace back to Jesus and Mary Magdalene. These connections were not casual. Some Templar commanderies were built on Merovingian land. Others housed chapels featuring 12-pointed stars, vines, and cryptic inscriptions. One theory suggests the Templars intended to replace corrupt European monarchs with members of this sacred line. That their expansion across Europe was not about banking or crusade support, but about building an underground network capable of supporting a hidden dynasty. Could this be why the Pope and the King of France moved so aggressively to erase them? Were they not just suppressing heresy, but silencing a rival claim to divine authority? The transformation. They rode back into France, not as humble knights, but as men transformed, silent, powerful, and untouchable. These were no longer the poor pilgrims who had left years before with nothing but vows and rusted swords. Nobles opened their gates. Popes granted privileges. Kings watched closely, but dared not interfere. How did the Templars rise so fast, so far? In a world where even whispers of independence from the Church were punished with fire, the answer, many believe, lies in what they brought back from beneath the Temple Mount. It wasn't gold or relics alone. It was something that couldn't be weighed or taxed. Leverage, knowledge, perhaps even a threat disguised as devotion. Within a few short years of returning from Jerusalem, the order received sweeping papal endorsements. They were allowed to travel freely across borders, collect tithes, build their own chapels, and answer to no bishop. Why would the Vatican grant such freedoms? Some scholars believe the answer is simple. They had no choice. The Templars had discovered something that could not be ignored. Whether it was proof of an alternate Christian lineage, ancient pre-biblical scrolls, or esoteric knowledge that threatened established theology, the Church may have been forced to cooperate rather than confront. Their wealth multiplied with suspicious speed. Land donations poured in. Their estates spread across France, England, Spain, and beyond. Pilgrims trusted them with their savings. Merchants used them as banks. Kings borrowed from them, then feared them. But what did the Templars do to deserve this trust so quickly? They didn't preach. They didn't publish. They didn't explain. The secret empire. In less than one generation, a small group of knights became one of the most powerful forces in Europe. And no one could quite explain how. The Templars were no longer just men of the sword. They became landowners, architects, naval traders, and most importantly, bankers. Their commanderies were more than places of worship. They were fortified hubs, positioned near trade routes, ports, and political centers. Their ledger books rivaled those of royal treasuries. Unlike other groups, the Templars kept no public doctrine. They had no single monastery, no single purpose visible to outsiders. Yet their actions suggest coordination across borders, languages, and monarchies. Their rules allowed them to bypass tolls, taxes, and even local laws. With papal blessing, they moved across nations like ghosts, collecting power without drawing attention. If they weren't serving the Church, and they weren't serving any king, then who, or what, were they really serving? Some believe the Templars operated under a hidden charter, an internal mission known only to their highest ranks. A document said to contain passages never revealed to the public. What secrets did those private rules hold? Their sudden leap into banking raised eyebrows. At a time when lending money at interest was considered a sin, the Templars found legal loopholes to finance kings, fund campaigns, and collect wealth across borders. They created a system of credit letters that allowed nobles to travel without carrying gold. But the real power lay in what they learned from these financial networks. They tracked trade flows, troop movements, and political shifts through money. Could this have been a form of intelligence, data used not to serve existing powers, but to build something of their own? The Gothic Code. In the century after the Templars returned from Jerusalem, cathedrals across Europe began to stretch higher, bend light, and whisper secrets through stone. The Gothic style, with its pointed arches, flying buttresses, and ribbed vaults, seemed to appear almost overnight. No one could explain how this sudden leap in architecture happened so fast, or why it followed such precise patterns. Scholars traced its rise to France, but some pointed deeper, to Jerusalem. Could the inspiration for these great cathedrals have come from a hidden chamber under Solomon's temple? A chamber not filled with treasure, but with plans, sacred plans. The kind of geometry that wasn't taught in monasteries but inherited from a past so ancient it had no name. In places like Chartres, Amiens, and Reims, stonemasons carved symbols no one could explain. Labyrinths appeared on floors. Rosettes filled with geometric precision adorned windows. Some of these designs matched ancient patterns found in Middle Eastern ruins. The vaults in these cathedrals didn't just hold up roofs. They guided force, sound, and spirit. They turned empty space into resonance chambers, focusing energy in ways modern science is still trying to understand. Pilgrims who entered often described feelings of calm, clarity, or awakening. Could this architecture have been meant to change the mind, not just the eye? Some researchers believe the Templars didn't bring back wealth, but wisdom, a system of measuring and shaping space that had been hidden beneath the temple since the days of Solomon. And if those original builders were drawing from even older sources, Egyptian, Sumerian, or beyond, then the Templars may have reopened a stream of forgotten knowledge that once tied heaven to earth, the language of symbols long after. Their swords were sheathed and their banners rolled away. The Templars continued to speak, but not in words. They spoke through symbols, circles carved into stone, keys etched beside altars, stars placed high on ceilings where only the observant would notice. To the common eye, they were decoration. But to those who had seen what lay beneath Jerusalem, these markings may have been a language, a quiet script used to share maps, rituals, and truths too dangerous to speak aloud. Among the most common was the 8-pointed star, sometimes in a compass rose, sometimes floating alone. This symbol appears not just in Templar sites, but in ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian ruins. What connection might exist between them? Another repeating mark was the key, not a medieval key for locks, but a symbolic one, often stylized, sometimes split in half, sometimes pointing downward into the earth. Was this a reminder of the sealed chamber beneath the temple mount? Certain circles called Templar, wheels, appear again and again, often divided into 6 or 8 spokes. These wheels show up on tombstones, gatehouses, and tower walls. Some believe they represent cycles of time, while others think they were celestial guides used for navigation or ritual timing. When mapped, some of these alignments formed sacred geometry, the same ratios found in the vaults of Gothic cathedrals and the ruins of Solomon's temple. It wasn't just symbols carved into stone. Some appeared in manuscripts, hidden in the margins, disguised as flourishes or decorative elements. Could entire teachings have been encoded into pages, waiting for the right reader to see beyond the ink? The Holy Grail. The image of the Holy Grail has become a golden cup in the minds of many. But the oldest stories say otherwise. They whisper of a grail not made of metal but of meaning, a vessel that held something far more powerful than wine or blood. It held truth. For the Templars who spent years beneath the ruins of Solomon's temple, the Grail may have been neither object nor relic, but a legacy, one tied not to a thing, but to a people, a bloodline, a truth so dangerous that it had to be wrapped in layers of myth to survive. The earliest legends of the Grail hint at something living, something passed from person to person, protected by a chosen few. In some versions, the Grail is described as a stone that fell from the heavens. In others, a radiant book or even a line of descent stretching back to ancient kings. Chrétien de Troyes, the writer who first gave the Grail its Western literary form, lived near Templar lands and was sponsored by nobles sympathetic to the order. Could his tale of a mysterious object that grants healing and knowledge have been inspired by something he heard whispered in stone halls? Some believe the Grail is not one but 2 things, knowledge and blood. Together, they form a legacy that must be kept hidden because it proves that divine right may not come from the church, but from lineage and wisdom kept alive through secret lines. If the Templars found records of this bloodline, perhaps even genealogies written during Solomon's reign, it would explain their sudden rise in wealth, status, and immunity. They no longer needed to seek power. They were protecting the source of it. The Church's warning power never moves quietly, and by the 13th century, the Church had begun to notice something troubling. The Templars, once loyal servants of the Cross, were growing more secretive, more independent, and far more powerful than anyone had expected. Whispers reached Rome that the Knights were hiding something, that beneath their vows of poverty and service, they were following an agenda the Vatican could not see. At first, the warnings came in private letters, carefully worded messages sent from bishops and cardinals who had visited Templar strongholds and noticed the signs: strange rituals, locked rooms, symbols not found in church doctrine. One archbishop wrote of a chapel where the altar faced not east but south, and where the only decoration was a carved key and a serpent. Another warned of chants spoken in languages no priest recognized. As tensions rose, Pope Boniface VIII issued quiet instructions to monitor Templar activity more closely. But even then, the order remained untouchable. Their popularity among common people and their military importance gave them a shield no decree could pierce. One papal note to a French cardinal reads, "The temple no longer kneels, and what does not kneel must be made to bow." These were not words of doctrine. They were words of war. Friday, the 13th. It began before dawn on a Friday, the 13th day of October, in the year 1307. Across France, doors were kicked in. Torches lit dark halls. Armored men stormed monasteries, farms, and strongholds. The Templars, once Europe's most trusted guardians, were taken by surprise. Some were dragged from beds. Others were seized in prayer. Hundreds of knights were arrested that morning under orders from King Philip IV and with the approval of Pope Clement V. The charge was heresy, but behind that word hid a deeper motive: debt and fear. The official story claimed the Templars had turned against the church, performing dark rituals, mocking the crucifix, and worshipping idols. But no idol was ever found. No uniform testimony ever emerged. Torture rooms echoed with conflicting stories, and still the greatest secrets of the Templars stayed hidden. Philip owed the Templars a fortune. His treasury was nearly empty, while the knights remained wealthy, organized, and respected. By attacking them, he erased a political threat and seized their assets. Behind closed doors, there were whispers of vaults the king never found, scrolls that vanished, names that remained unwritten. During the trials, certain patterns emerged. Templars were questioned about strange phrases whispered during rituals, obscure words spoken in foreign tongues about a head-shaped idol called Baphomet, though no two men described it the same way. Were these real practices misunderstood, or fabrications meant to justify what had already been decided? On March 18, 1314, 7 years after the arrests, the last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake on an island in the Seine River. Before the flames took him, he cried out not in pain, but in defiance. He summoned the Pope and the King to join him in judgment before God. Within a year, both men were dead. The vanished fleet. As the net closed around them on that infamous October morning, the Templars did something the Church and the Crown never expected. They vanished. Not all, of course. Many were taken. But in the days before the arrests, a number of ships quietly left the port of La Rochelle under Templar command and were never seen again. No official manifest, no confirmed destination, just open sails, loaded hulls, and a silence that would echo through history. Witnesses at the docks reported that the loading began late at night. Crates were carried aboard by cloaked men, guarded not by armed escorts, but by Templar brothers themselves. Some said the boxes were heavy. Others swore they were treated like sacred objects, handled with careful reverence. Rumors spread that scrolls were among the cargo, old, brittle, and sealed with symbols no one could read. Were these the same scrolls said to be found beneath Solomon's temple? The fleet's disappearance has never been explained. Templar records from La Rochelle ended abruptly, as if someone deliberately erased their final entries. French authorities arrived too late. The docks were empty, the storage houses cleaned out. Some historians believe the fleet sailed west toward the British Isles or even to remote islands off the Scottish coast. Others believe the ships headed further, to Portugal, where the Templars would eventually reform under a different name. But a smaller, persistent theory claims that one or more of the vessels crossed the Atlantic long before Columbus. Could that explain why certain Native American petroglyphs show symbols resembling Templar crosses? How did a carved stone bearing a Templar emblem end up buried in Nova Scotia? Rosslyn Chapel. In the quiet green hills just outside Edinburgh, a small chapel stands alone. Wrapped in centuries of silence and stone, Rosslyn Chapel, built in the mid-15th century, looks like a place of worship, but it feels like something else. Every surface hums with symbols, every arch whispers with carved secrets. Angels play instruments never seen before. Flowers bloom from pillars that touch no soil. Frozen in its walls are patterns, codes, and geometry that have defied explanation for over 500 years. Many believe this chapel holds the last echo of a vanished order. The chapel was commissioned by Sir William Sinclair, a nobleman with blood ties to Scottish Templars and rumoured connections to Freemasonry. But historians have long asked how one man could design such a place, so rich in symbolism, so accurate in astronomical alignment, and so steeped in mysteries far older than Christianity itself. Some researchers suggest that Sinclair did not invent the chapel's design, but inherited it, that the blueprints came from those who escaped the Templar arrests, carrying not just relics, but an entire system of sacred knowledge. Rosslyn's layout contains features that mirror descriptions of Solomon's temple from ancient Hebrew texts. The two great pillars inside bear uncanny resemblance to Jachin and Boaz, the legendary columns said to have flanked the entrance to Solomon's sanctuary. The symbolism inside deepens the mystery. Over 100 green men, faces of nature spirits, peek from the stonework. A pagan motif rarely seen in Christian chapels. Musical cubes line the arches, their placements believed by some to form a harmonic code. Perhaps the most intriguing clue lies in the apprentice pillar, a spiraling stone column covered in vines, dragons, and ancient motifs. It is unlike anything else in the chapel. Some say it represents the tree of life. Others claim it mirrors a DNA helix. In recent years, scanning technology has revealed hidden chambers beneath the chapel floor. Excavations have been denied, but what lies beneath? Some suspect it may be the resting place of relics smuggled out of Jerusalem, possibly even the Grail itself. The Priory of Sion. It wasn't the swords or the secrets buried under Solomon's temple that survived the fall of the Templars. It may have been the men who walked away quietly. Long after the last Templar was burned at the stake, stories surfaced about another brotherhood that didn't wear armor or ride horses, but operated like shadows inside the very halls of power. They were called the Priory of Sion. While the world slept, they were said to guard something so controversial, so explosive that the Vatican, kings, and secret societies all kept watch. In the 20th century, a strange bundle of papers, known as the Dossier Secrets, surfaced in the French National Library. These pages listed names, Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli, Isaac Newton, as past grandmasters of this hidden order. Most historians called the documents a hoax, but deeper inspection revealed an unsettling pattern. The symbols in the documents matched those carved into early Gothic churches, those used by fleeing Templars, and those found in crypts once sealed during the Inquisition. One theory suggests that the priory was formed not after the Templars, but alongside them, a civilian branch designed to guard something the Church feared more than any sword or relic: a bloodline. Hidden in plain sight, this brotherhood might have operated through family lines, silent alliances, and coded communications that only the initiated would recognize. Towns in southern France still echo with stories of unusual families, ones that held scrolls, passed down through generations, never shown, never explained. The Temple Code. Some say the Temple of Solomon was not just a house of worship, but a map of the universe carved into stone. Its dimensions, layout, and orientation were said to mirror the stars themselves, echoing a design older than any religion. But what if this wasn't just sacred architecture? What if it was a coded system, a cosmic formula passed down from an even more ancient civilization? Ancient sources describe the temple not just as a place of worship, but as a machine of alignment. Its layout, proportions, and materials were said to mirror the universe's deepest structures. When biblical measurements are overlaid onto known geometric forms, researchers find exact matches with the flower of life, the golden mean, and other forms later linked to sacred geometry. There are references in Old Hebrew texts that describe the temple as a place where sound moved through stone like wind through trees, suggesting that the structure channeled vibrations. Could certain rituals performed within the temple have been amplified by the very shape of its walls? And could those frequencies have affected states of consciousness, unlocking visions, insight, or altered awareness? If so, then the temple was not only a house for God, it was a map of how to reach him. The unspoken name. Hidden beneath layers of ancient language and sacred tradition lies a name that few have dared to utter. Some say it was the true name of God. Others claim it was a word of power known only to kings and high priests. According to Jewish mystics, Solomon did not build the temple by force alone, but by commanding spirits using a sacred word only he could speak. This name, never written, never spoken aloud, was said to control wind, fire, and stone. It opened portals, it sealed them, and some believe it was carved into the very foundation of the temple, hidden where only the initiated could find it. The Templars, trained as warrior monks, may have recognized these signs. In their travels, they encountered Islamic architecture rich with mathematical symbolism, Hebrew texts filled with measurements and ratios, and Greek writings about divine proportions. It's said that after their time in Jerusalem, their own buildings changed. Round churches, labyrinthine cathedrals, and spiral staircases began to appear, some matching the ratios seen in Solomon's temple. Could they have learned of a secret embedded in the temple's design? A ratio not yet fully understood, but one that appears in biology, light, and even atomic structure. The legacy. By the time the last Templar Grandmaster was burned at the stake, the public story of the order was all but over. But their silence did not mark the end. It marked a turning. Their names were stripped from records, their buildings taken or destroyed, their symbols condemned as heresy. Yet in the shadows of history, echoes of their presence lingered. Not in official texts, but in architecture, folklore, and ritual. Across Europe, as the Church tightened its grip, new groups began to emerge. Craft guilds, stonemasons, philosophical societies that seemed to speak a language older than their own founding dates. These groups adopted symbols once tied to Solomon's temple: the compass, the square, the all-seeing eye, and twin pillars named Jachin and Boaz. These weren't mere decorations. They formed part of a coded system, initiations, degrees, and rituals that mirrored the ancient knowledge the Templars were rumored to have protected. Many point to the rise of the Freemasons as evidence. While their public records begin much later, their oldest rites are full of temple references. Initiates are guided through allegories of Solomon's builders, taught to seek light through order and measure, and to protect the secrets of the craft with their lives. One degree speaks of a lost word, another of a buried treasure of wisdom meant to be restored by a future generation. Where did these ideas come from? And why do they mirror Templar beliefs so closely? The final secret. There was a room in Solomon's temple so sacred that only one man could enter it once a year, and even then, only after purification. It was called the Holy of Holies, a chamber said to hold the Ark of the Covenant and the very presence of the divine. But what if that room held more than just relics of belief? What if the Templars, digging beneath the Temple Mount, reached this final space, untouched by centuries, sealed by time, and saw something that rewrote everything they thought they knew? Some say they found nothing, others say they found too much. According to legends that echo across old Masonic texts, Islamic traditions, and hidden gospels, there was a moment when the Templars stood in the dark beneath stone older than Jerusalem itself, and discovered an object, or perhaps a truth, not meant to be carried into the world above. Could they have found evidence of an ancient civilization? One that predated Israel, Egypt, and Sumer. A civilization that encoded its knowledge not in books, but in structure and sound. There are accounts from later Templars who spoke in code, referring to the center that does not move, and the eye that sees but cannot be seen. Descriptions of a place or an object that projected knowledge without words. Something that showed the truth of human history in an instant. And with it, the terrible realization that everything above, every crown, every church, every empire, was built on a story that wasn't fully true. If the Templars found a device, a relic, or a recording beneath the temple, then they didn't bring it into the world. They hid it. Some believe it was smuggled out aboard the fleet that vanished in the early 14th century. Others think it was buried again, far from Jerusalem, sealed inside another structure that only the initiated would know how to find. Perhaps the most chilling theory is that the Templars didn't just find a secret, they activated it. That the Holy of Holies was a trigger, a beacon, a threshold, something that responds only when the right frequency, geometry, or presence is near. If so, then maybe it wasn't just about guarding the past. Maybe it was about preparing for the future. The Vatican has sealed archives no scholar can open. Governments have placed surveillance around old Templar sites. Certain blueprints remain classified under the excuse of security. But what if it's not about danger to people, but danger to power? Could this be the real reason the Templars were hunted, erased, and condemned? Not for what they did, but for what they knew. The Holy of Holies was not just a room. It was the axis of a sacred world view. The final point in a system of meaning that connected heaven, earth, and what came before. If the Templars saw it, touched it, or understood it, then they carried with them the one thing empires fear most, a truth too big to control. That is the final secret, that the temple was not just a place, but a message, that history as we know it was rewritten to protect those in power, and that somewhere, buried in stone or sealed in symbols, the original page still waits to be read, not by kings or priests, but by those willing to see without fear.